wellness and health, events, reviews, and more. LifeHakx.
This is Mary Collins with LifeHakx Media and Radio X, and I have the extreme pleasure to have online with me today Professor Moran Cerf. Hello, Moran. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. I'm pleased to be here.
It's an honor because, first of all, besides the fact that you're a super scientific, professor, you do some exciting things. So I'll just explain to our audience a little bit more about you. Moran Cerf is a neuroscientist and a business professor at the Kellogg School of Management and the Neuroscience program at Northwestern University. Dr. Cerf holds a PhD in neuroscience from Caltech, an MA in philosophy, and a BSc in physics from Tel Aviv University. He is also a member of the Institute on Complex Systems. He holds multiple patents and has published over 60 academic papers in journals such as Nature, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and the Journal of Neuroscience, as well as popular science journals such as Scientific American Mind, Wired, New Scientist, and more. Additionally, his work has been portrayed in numerous media and cultural outlets such as CNN, BBC, Bloomberg, NPR, Time, MSNBC, Forbes, and dozens of others. In addition, he has also received several awards and grants for his work, including the Instructional Improvement Grant, prestigious President's Scholarship for Excellence. He has been named one of the 40 leading professors below 40, and Dr. Cerf has spent nearly a decade in industry, holding positions in computer security as a hacker, which is perfect for LifeHakx, pharmaceutical, telecom, fashions, software development, and innovations research. Currently, Professor Cerf is on the board of a number of neurotech companies. This is exciting. Neuroscientist, VR Americas, and Best Fit, and is the co-founder of Think Alike. So, also the founder of something called B-Cube, which applies neuroscience to help society. And that's what we want to do today at LifeHakx, is help society with your ingenious ideas.
Let's do it.
First of all, what inspired you to go from computer security hacker to a doctor of neuroscience?
So, like many things in life, it's a combination of luck, chance, arbitrary occurrences, and some backward storytelling of how you got to where you got as if it was planned. The real answer, I would say, are the following. I, first of all, was interested in the brain always. It felt to me, even before, as kind of the hallmark of who we are and the answer to a lot of interesting questions about free will and consciousness and so on. So it didn't start from nowhere. I had those questions in mind, but what actually kind of pushed things further was a meeting with a famous professor who himself was a hacker back in World War II. And when the war has ended, he kind of said, what do hackers do with their skills? What's useful in those? And he met a biologist who told him, if you know how to hack, I have this molecule. It has kind of all kinds of amino acid. They interact in some fashion. Maybe you can help me decode and parse what's going on there. And the two of them discovered the DNA and got a Nobel Prize for explaining how life works. This was when he was younger. Now, 50 years after when I met him, or it was actually 40 years after when I met him, he basically learned that I was working as a hacker now in a different world. But he said, if you know how to hack computers and you kind of have some sense of how to decode codes and understand kind of systems like that, maybe you can apply that to the next big problem of the world, which is our brain. It still looks like a code and we don't know how to parse it, and maybe you can use the same skills. And this was what I needed in order to push me from hacking to applying it to neuroscience.
Wow. And speaking of hacking, one of the biggest boasts I think you must have, like the perfect chat up line, which is, I used to rob banks for a living. I mean, yes. You got to tell our audience more about that. How did that, what's that about?
So back in the early 90s, early 2000s, so this decade, computers started to go online. So now it seems obvious that there's an internet, but back then it wasn't the case. Like banks just started to create websites or just started to allow people to even view their accounts online and stuff like that. And At the same time, the bank said, okay, we also need to make sure that no hacker actually can get into the bank and steal money. So the way to do it is they, of course, try to do the best they can to secure themselves. But they also would hire hackers like myself to do what's known as penetration testing. So this is a test where the bank board, usually, the bank itself doesn't even know, gives you an account and tells you and your team are asked to try to break into the bank in the next week and steal money from us. And when you do, tell us how you did it so we can actually secure ourselves better from the real villains. Mm-hmm. So this would mean that we would get an account, we would get a bank name, we would get some information about the bank, and our job was in the next week to steal money from them with their blessing. And so often it would require hacking remotely. So you sit kind of behind a desk and you access the bank and so on. But sometimes it would also require actually physically going to the bank and seeing if someone maybe forgot the password in a Post-it note on their computer that you can use, or if the cameras are not looking at the right location, or even sometimes going to the teller and saying, hey, can you just give me the bank safe's key and see if they say yes. And we did that a few times. So we did physically sometimes go into banks and actually rob the bank old-fashioned way.
So, of course, on LifeHakx, we're not going to do that today. We're not going to learn how to rob a bank. Not today, anyway.
Why work harder when you can work smarter and live better?
We're on LifeHakx with Professor Moran Cerf, also Dr. Cerf, talking all about his exciting career as a neuroscientist. So with that, Moran, how did you get into, or what tell us more about your work in neuroscience?
Oh, wow, that's a huge question. I think, so if I had to give a title, I would say that there's this elusive thing called psychology and behavior. People do things and they think things, and the assumption among neuroscientists is that every action and every thought that we have emerge in a specific location in the brain that we can actually pinpoint. So ultimately, when I speak to you right now, information flows from my brain to your brain, and it gets stored somewhere. And that if we just understood each and every neuron in your brain and its connection to other neurons, we can actually map your thoughts and really predict your actions, explain your behavior fully, and maybe even kind of get access to your psyche in ways that you don't have yourself. So we can say, yeah, you say that you want this, but actually inside you want that. That's the kind of, big 10,000 feet above ground aim of neuroscientists. When you go down to the ground, we typically are able to maybe tell that you want chocolate rather than vanilla. That's about where we can get. But at the same time, our aim is to do that. Our aim is to take people and have them do things in a lab. So make decisions, look at movies and try to understand what's going on in those movies, talk to one another while we monitor their brain and try to predict what they say in answer to questions that will follow or how they will behave. Concrete examples could be, we ask them to sit in the lab and look at options and make a decision. So we give them a menu, so to speak, and we say, on the menu you have steak, salmon, and salad, and it's lunchtime, pick one that you want. So they would say, I want the salmon, and we ask the question, looking at their brain, how soon before they said the word salmon could we have said they're going to say salmon? And with what probability? That's a neuroscience approach to understanding free will. Similarly, we can have the person go to sleep and say, okay, you go to sleep, you just take a 7-hour sleep in a bed, and when you wake up, tell us what you dreamt of. Seemingly, that's all you do, but we look at your brain while you sleep, and we try to see how accurate can we be in looking at your dreams while you're sleeping and predicting before you wake up what story you will tell us about your dreams. And if the stories match, we're happy that we can predict them. And if the stories don't match, we ask the question, why is it that in my interpretation of your brain, it was you and your dad going for a walk, but in your story, it was you and your mom? Is it because you, when you wake up, change dad to mom, or because I was just misreading your brain activity and I can do better? So that's another approach, to look at the brain and try to predict what you see inside. We have experiments where we actually find in your brain locations of memories. So we find the part of your brain that lights up when you think of, say, a microphone, and another part that lights up when you think of the Eiffel Tower in Paris. And then we have you close your eyes and just imagine one of those two items. Just don't tell us, but imagine one, but we kind of look at which part lights up, and we say, right now, you're imagining the Eiffel Tower. And if we do it with enough things, not just microphone, Eiffel Tower, but like 10,000 things, we can actually just have you close your eyes and imagine things. and we'll just create an entire story that reflects what's in your mind. I can go on and on.
So hold on. So are you saying that you're already at that stage where you can actually record a person's dream, like what's like sci-fi? No.
So dream. So dream is always, of course, the one. So there's like kind of two competing approaches, and one succeed in one succeed in another, but they all aim at the same idea. So I'll give you kind of the kind of preview of where we are. Approach number one says, let's look at the back of your brain. In the back of your brain, in every human, lie the part that passes visual information. So when you look at me right now, you see an oval-shaped kind of thing in the center, and you see that it has different color contrast. There's the color of my hair, there's the color of my face, there's the color of the background, and your visual cortex in the back easily passes those. It says, okay, this is a shape, and that's the background, and those are the colors, because there are parts of your brain that process color, there are parts that process shape, others that process motion, others process contrast, and so on. Mm-hmm. So all of those things happen automatically in the back of your brain. Because we know exactly how those things work, we can put sensors next to the back of your brain and just have you dream. And because we can read the visual, we can see right now in her dream, she sees an oval shape. And this oval shape is pink in the inside, and it's different from the background, which is a little bit lighter. And maybe the background is made of two rectangles, one is blue and one is green. And just by having those kind of information structures, we can start saying, well, maybe she sees a person and he is walking from left to right, and the top rectangle is the sky because it's blue, and the bottom one is grass. And you can start making up a suggested interpretation of your dream by looking at colors, shapes, motions, and luminance, and so on, and try to make up a story. The good news is that it's pretty accurate in seeing what you see, because the visuals that are in the cortex come from the brain, even though you're dreaming, and they give us some kind of residue of the visual that we can interpret. That's the good news. The bad news is that it's extremely low resolution. Like I could say that you see a blue rectangle above a green rectangle and suggest that it might be the sky above a grassy meadow, but actually what you dreamt of was a kid painting two rectangles in two different colors, and I would totally miss the kind of narrative. I would just, so that's approach number one. It gives you the visual, but it doesn't give you any semantics. Approach number two, which I kind of have more foot in, is the approach that actually requires brain surgery prior to the study. And it only works with patients who undergo some extreme surgeries that allow us to put electrodes inside their brain. Then we actually have electrodes deep into their head, and those electrodes sit right above the areas that I mentioned to you earlier that decode thoughts. So instead of looking at a visual, I'm looking at memories. And there I can map, before you go to sleep, the cell in your brain that comes to life when you think of a microphone, and the cell that comes to life when you think of your mom or on the Eiffel Tower. And I just, when you're awake, show you pictures of your mom or pictures of microphone and see which cell light up. And then I say, okay, this is the memory of mom. So now I know. And then when you go to sleep, I keep eavesdropping on those same cells. And if I see that sometime in your dream, the mom cell lights up, or the beach light up, or the sunset light up, I can say, okay, she and her mom are walking on the beach and they see the sunset. And I can really craft a story. The good news here is I can really see the narrative of your dream in time and in space, and very, very kind of correct. The bad news is I don't have the visual. So I don't know if your mom is wearing a white dress or a blue dress. I don't know if she's young or old. I don't know what you see. So if you combine those two approaches, one that actually sees the visual with one that gives you access to the narrative, you can probably come up with a full description of a dream. Right now, it's done in two separate kind of approaches, so we still don't have like as clear movie that you can extract when a person is sleeping that says, that's what they're seeing perfectly, and we still rely on some interpretation, which is a kind of gap, but also a big, big step compared to what we had even 5 years ago, and certainly a huge step compared to what Freud had 100 years ago, which was only the story that you tell him when you wake up, which usually is totally flawed and had nothing to do with either your mom, nor the beach, nor the sunset, or anything that Freud relied on.
Wow. I mean, good luck with my dreams. I dream like psychedelically.
LifeHakx.
So you were telling us about how the brain can be you can look inside the brain and see what people are dreaming. You're like at that point. What does this mean to the whole sci-fi script technology and the freedom of choice and predictive behavior? Explain a little bit more about that, how that works.
So it's a unresolved question in neuroscience that unfortunately going to disappoint you when I give you the answer, which is we don't know. We don't know yet whether we do or do not have free will. When it comes to free will, we're kind of at the same place physicists are when they speak about the Big Bang. We can describe everything up to the first moment, but everyone wants to know, but what happened before? So in free will, or as you kind of asked about choices, we can describe choices definitely when you articulate them. We can describe choices seconds before you articulate them when they just kind of bubble up in your brain. We can even sometimes in some people, or definitely with animal studies, go back in the brain from kind of the cascade of operations that lead to a choice all the way to ones that happen way, way earlier. So if the rat in the maze is going to, in 10 seconds, get to a T, and she's going to have to make a choice whether to go left or right, we can look at the rat's brain a minute and a half before she's even seen the T or the fork in the road and already predict that she's most likely going to choose to go left, even though she doesn't even know that there's going to be a T and he doesn't know anything. We can kind of zap her brain or read from her brain and see that the neurons that code for going left are much more amplified than the ones going right, and we can predict things. And that's remarkable when you think of the fact that we think that our choices happen in the present and that whenever we see the option, that's when we make the choice. So in that sense, we've gotten far before the choice when it comes to explaining it, and yet we never know how it starts. So we can never find this one, cell that goes from 0 to something, from 0 to 1. It doesn't code for anything and suddenly it codes for something. We always see things, and every time we start, there's one thing before that we're missing. So we're kind of like a Big Bang. We can produce the entire operation, but we don't know where it begins.
Okay. Well, with saying that, though, it does show the potential for social media, marketers, et cetera, to make money or kind of, step on that and really get working with it. And as a matter of fact, there's a certain company right now in a big lawsuit because of algorithms. So is that what you're saying, is that although you maybe don't know the exact cells that control our thoughts or what we're going to do, there are ways to manipulate what people are going to do?
So I'll say it in two ways. First of all, it's not surprising. We've seen people being manipulated by media for centuries.
Yeah.
Technology changed it and made it large scale, easier, more specific. But the fact that humans can be manipulated is not new. Go back to any war and any propaganda that happened prior to this war and so on, and you'll see people whose expertise or mastery was in moving the masses in one or the other direction. Mm-hmm. The fact that it became amplified in the last couple of years because of social media and technology is not a surprise, and it's something that everyone should be concerned about because it's kind of here and it's at scale. I would say that at the same time, we're still looking at the tip of the iceberg. So even though people might be concerned right now about, I didn't really want to buy this knife and I saw it on a Facebook ad, and what about 10 seconds later, I'm kind of on the purchase screen of something that I didn't know I needed 5 minutes ago, is only a kind of a precursor to what could happen if those companies and those kind of mega monopolies have access to our brain. So so far, we still have our guards to protect ourselves. You can do your best to not buy the knife that you saw on Facebook if you decide that you don't want to. But what if Facebook was in your brain and you just had the knife and you didn't even remember making the decision? Or your memory of making the choice is part of the thing that manipulates your choice. So you just think that you want it and you just make the choice without knowing that you didn't really want to make the choice, but someone else got into your brain. So I think that if you kind of compared us to 100 years ago and you said, well, it looks much worse right now, I can make a prediction that it's going to be much, much worse in not even 100 years, but in 10 years, when the access goes still into the scales brain and into any individual in their language that they kind of prefer, but also bypassing their sensory filters and even creating false memories of their decisions. That's the kind of worst case scenario.
Wow. And speaking of which, I mean, yeah, I would definitely want to point out the fact that we'll have to have you back on talking about what creates the perfect kind of brainwashing scenario. I think we all know, we've seen it, like you said, in a war before, and it's always propaganda, and it's always with fear and division. But speaking of which, I just want to plug the fact that you have your own annual screenwriting class on science in film. So,
as a scientist, I have two beliefs. One is that Hollywood is fantastic in communicating science. No matter how good a job I will do in your show communicating the work, it will always surpass my ability to communicate the work via an academic paper. And Hollywood is amazing in taking a result, an answer, a scientific outcome, and making it into a good story that everyone wants to hear. So in that sense, I feel that just using the amplifier of Hollywood is a fantastic way to get information to everyone in a language that people want to hear. Yeah. So that's kind of one thing. The other thing is that Hollywood is not constrained by reality. And in that sense, they can sit there and say, what if? So they think about teleportation way before scientists can do it in Star Trek. Or they invented devices that are basically mobile that allow you to talk to one another way before we had mobile phones. And it's true for so many things, flying humans, changing organs, all of those things. If you look at history, the first time you heard about them was in a Hollywood sci-fi movie. And then 20 years later, you hear about them in an academic research. So in that sense, I think scientists should look at Hollywood, talk to content creators, screenwriters, because they're not constrained. So they can imagine things and then we can say, can we do it? I think there's a quote that I really like that says, the difference between science fiction and science is timing. Most of the movies I grew up on as science fiction movies are now documentaries. You see them now in Netflix documentaries because they just take how can we do teleportation? Here's the kind of process. How does mobile phone work? How does communicating without words work? All of those things that kind of were in Jules Verne or Asimov books are now in the lab. So in that sense, I think Hollywood is a good place to look at, and I put some of the eggs in this basket myself because of this idea. I like talking to them, and I think I like their power of communicating my ideas.
Okay, and just like you had said before, the importance of media and science is that it can influence us one way or the other. So let's hope that science works with media to move us in a more positive way towards, wonderful discoveries and perhaps less murderous,
I agree.
Plots. And it also is a great way for you to say about, people who want to change careers. Just consider, you have done it all. You're a scientist, you're a film screenwriting professional, you do TED Talks. Anyone who's interested, please look up morancerf.com. We will have all of his information on LifeHakx.com. That's with a K and an X. And we cannot wait to have you back on the show. And for those budding screenwriters, looks like we've got another person here that's interested in finding out or collaborating with you further. So we hope to have you on the show again. Thank you so much. It has been an absolute honor to have you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Now I can add LifeHakx to my badges with all of my titles. One more. LifeHakx.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.
LifeHakx. LifeHakx.com. That's with a K and an X. Wellness and health, events, reviews, and more. LifeHakx.